So let's talk about that the role of the brain in endurance and athletic performance. And I specifically want to discuss a term that you brought up in your book, which is this idea of a central governor. And it's funny because I first came across this term when I read David Goggins' book Can't Hurt Me. And he doesn't use the term central governor. He doesn't use the central part, but he does say that there's a governor inside your brain that basically dictates how much pain you're willing to endure, how far you're willing to go. And so he calls it. I have the quote pulled up here. He calls it the 40% rule. So he says that we normally only give 40%, and if you want to unlock the remaining 60%, you need to learn how to control this governor that's dictating your moves. So a little bit on what this governor actually is. What is this idea of a central governor?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say like 40%. Okay, that's just a number. Like that's
Right.
not a real number, but the idea is what's important. And the term central governor was coined in the late 90s by a guy named Tim Noakes, who's a South African scientist. The basic idea, and I should also, the other preface is lots of controversy, lots of debate, lots of academic discussion. It's not easy to peer, it's easy to look inside the body and see how the heart's working. It's not easy to look inside the head and understand what the brain is doing. But the general idea is, if you didn't have this governor which to hold you back when you're approaching your limits, you could just run yourself to death or push yourself to death or whatever. You really want to win the Olympics, you're just going to keep pushing, and then it's like all the oxygen's going to your muscles, none is going to your brains or your heart. Your heart's going to stop working, your brain's going to black out, you're going to die. And so just over the course of evolutionary time, and it's not just about the Olympics. It's like you are chasing an antelope across the savannah to hunting. If you can give everything you've got, you're going to chase that antelope until you keel over, and then you're 20 miles from your home in the middle of the hot sun and you've got no energy left and you're going to die, or a predator is going to come and get you. So it makes sense that we have this some sort of system that really puts the limits on us to try to make sure we have energy left for emergencies. And so one way to see this or to think about this is like go watch your local 5K, stand near the finish line, stand a half mile or a quarter mile from the finish line, and you see all these people straggling in, exhausted, like they've given everything they've got. They turn the corner and they see the finish line in the distance, and they're like, woohoo! And they're suddenly sprinting at top speed. And it's like, why did you save all that energy for the sprint? And to them, it's like, oh, I wasn't saving energy. I was really, really tired with half a mile to go. And then with a quarter of a mile to go, I realized I was almost done and I suddenly felt fine. And so you think, well, these guys are clowns. They just don't know how to run a 5K. So you say, okay, let's look at the data from world record holders. Look at the pacing patterns for 5K, for the mile, for 10K, for whatever. And you find this very pronounced U-shaped pacing pattern where people start out fast, settle into a sustained pace, and then even for the greatest runners in the world, on the greatest day of their lives, they get to the last lap and all of a sudden they can pick it up. And so the way Tim Noakes would interpret this is the central governor is kind of making sure that they don't run out of energy. And it doesn't know, you don't necessarily know exactly how long you're going to have to keep going when you're in a race. You don't have an exact sense until you get to that last lap or you turn the corner and see the finish line. Then you're like, oh, I'm going to be able to stop soon. I don't need to be so conservative anymore. I can release the energy. And this is something that's not conscious. You're not deliberately holding back. And I can say this as a runner. I've tried many times to say, don't be cautious. Just like give it everything you've got. And still you get close to the finish line and you realize, oh, I did have more. And so that fundamentally is what we're talking about with the central governor, that there's more energy in the tank. And on some level below your consciousness, your brain is saving it as a let's say an emergency supply or to protect yourself. But it's a big margin of safety. So David Goggins says it's 60% is being held there. If you look at some of there's literature like looking at muscle activation when people are lifting maximally. Are they really lifting 100%, using 100% of their muscle fibers? It's not 40%. It's probably closer to 90% or, a little above 90%. But there's still some extra there. So then when you see that it's your kid who's under the car you can lift a little harder, try to get the wheels of the car off your kid or whatever. That's kind of gruesome to say, but you know what I mean? This idea of like being able to dig deeper when the stakes are highest.
And throughout the book, you present it, the way, I guess the way that I interpreted the book and how it was written is that based off of research that there's basically two different schools of thought when it comes to endurance and athletic performance. And those two schools of thought differ in how they classify the mind and the body. And so perhaps there's a school of thought, which, you mentioned Tim Noakes, which he was a big proponent of your mind really dictates your limits. And then there is perhaps a second school of thought that says, well, your body, your muscles, right, what's happening inside really dictates, sends signals up to your brain, which then tell you, hey, this is our current state. This is where we're at. So just general thoughts on that. And how would you, is it right to say that those are the two schools of thought?
So here's how I would divide it. There's two big camps. One is that it's all about the body. And if we understood enough about physiology, it's like your limits in a race or while lifting something are dictated by, what's your core temperature? Is it, have you overheated, or what are your muscle fibers doing? Are you recruiting 100% of your muscle fibers, or, but it's just, it's like a car. I don't ask, or what are the fundamental limits of my car? Well, if I get on a straight flat piece of road and I put the gas pedal all the way down, that's as fast as the car can go. And it will keep going until it runs out of gas, or until the radiator boils over, or whatever the case may be. And there's no like, well, did the car try hard enough, or did the car pace itself well? No, it's like on a straight flat track, you just put the pedal down and that's it. And the body's the same. You can run as fast as your legs will carry you for as long as you have enough fuel and as long as you don't overheat. And so Tim Noakes' big contribution was to say, that's not, cars have a driver that make a decision. Like if you go too fast in a car, you're going to be burning fuel more quickly. Maybe if it's a long race, you want to drive at a slower pace so that you won't have to refuel as often. There's all these decisions that get made both consciously and unconsciously. And so the first school of thought is this: it's just the body. You're just like a car or whatever. It's like a machine. The second school of thought is no. It's crucially depends on the decisions and the regulatory control of the brain. Within that school of thought, there's then multiple streams that trying to answer the question of, okay, well, how does this kind of governor type thing work? What's happening? And so Tim Noakes and his initial research was suggesting, well, there's like, your brain just shuts off the nervous signals to your muscles when it detects danger or something. I think there's a sort of rival view, which I think is now probably more widely accepted, which is that actually it's not this sort of hidden unconscious like circuit breaker that flips or whatever. That actually it all comes down to your sense of effort. That you consciously perceive how hard something is. So we talked about this earlier. That endurance is struggling to continue against a mounting desire to stop. And how do we sort of monitor that level of effort that we're putting in? Well, we have if I ask you, if you're in the middle of swimming, if I stop you halfway through one of your workouts and say, how hard are you working? A scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it to continue doing this? You can give me an answer. It's 6 out of 10. It's 8 out of 10. It's 3 out of 10, depending on how you're feeling that day. And that answer, what does that answer represent? It represents everything. It represents how hot you are. It represents how well you slept last night. It represents how fatigued your muscles are. It represents how motivated you are. So all these things are kind of integrated in one center in the brain, and your limits are when your effort maxes out. And so that incorporates that you're willing to try harder in the Olympics than you are, in a solo workout at the local pool. So I think, to me, that's the most compelling picture. And so it's not that it's all in your head. I think this is a really important point to make when I sort of talk about these two camps, the brain and the body. To say that effort is what matters is not that it's just like all you have to do is try and you can do anything. And if you want it hard enough, you can win the Olympics. because your effort is dictated by what's happening in your body. And the fitter you are, the less sort of distress signals your muscles are going to be sending to you, the cooler you'll stay, the easier your body's working. So that all factors into how hard it feels, which in turn dictates whether you can push harder or whether you need to stop.